Okay, American history. We are now in the 60s, especially 60s and the 70s. And someone who is a huge person in this time period. Actually, as I look at the video screen, it's that person right there, Lyndon Johnson. So I've got that bumper sticker up there because I got it from, I think, the Kennedy Library. It's not an original, it's a recreation. I put that to remember, Kennedy was assassinated and LBJ was his vice president and he becomes president. So I only have 10 minutes. Here's the best I can do. Try to get your attention. Lyndon Johnson was one of the most successful presidents in history, one of the most accomplished politicians in getting things done since perhaps Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. So he's one of the most successful. And Lyndon Johnson is one of the biggest failures as president. One man can be both things. So he's fascinating to study. He's also a really interesting character for sure. And so that is a subject of what your free response is. So I'm trying to help you towards that. Part of his successes is the continuation of the New Deal program. New Deal programs in the 30s with Franklin Roosevelt included, of course, Social Security and government programs, work programs, WPA programs, the Civilian Conservation Corps, bank reform, FDIC, all of those things which meant to help to reform the economy, help to recover from the Great Depression, and to provide a safety net. So Lyndon Johnson is a New Deal Democrat. He grows up with Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal program, and then he enters in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, and had been there forever before he becomes Kennedy's vice president. He ran against Kennedy for the nomination and lost, and always felt, in some ways rightly so, that he was the one that should have been, it was his turn to be president. But Kennedy, very young, youthful, and charismatic Kennedy, kind of leapfrogged ahead of him. But then Kennedy is assassinated, and lo and behold, Johnson is president. He's got all this experience as a senator. I mean, he was very, very effective legislator, and a very, very effective president because, first and foremost, he gets the Civil Rights Act passed. That was huge. I don't think that Kennedy could have gotten it passed. And Kennedy originally didn't even come out in support of it, only after continued violence in the South and the March on Washington, he came out in support of it. But as a Northerner, Johnson's from Texas, and as a Northerner, I don't know that they could have got it passed. Plus, Johnson has those skills to get legislation passed, and he utilizes that to get the Civil Rights Act passed. Then he also got the Voting Rights Act passed. And then the social program, and the Voting Rights Act is big. The social safety net programs. So what did Johnson accomplish? Medicare. If you're older and you want health care for your retirement, that's what that is. Because the theory is that, well, if you have a job, you have insurance, you can pay for your insurance. Now, as we know, millions of Americans then and still today can't get that. So the idea was, well, but old people aren't working, and so they don't have any insurance unless you're rich. And children aren't working, they don't have any insurance unless their parents are rich. So you had Medicare, which was insurance, health insurance and health program for the elderly, and then Medicaid, which we call Sooner Care in Oklahoma, for the lower income families who can't afford health care for their children. So it's meant to cover those holes. By the way, Obamacare was meant to cover the holes for the rest of Americans 18 to 65 who cannot afford insurance, but that's 40 years down the line. And so the idea is we can at least get these people covered. It became so popular and still is today. It's a socialist program, yes, socialism. It always kills me when people are like, you stupid socialist, and you better not touch my Medicare. And it's like, well, that Medicare is socialism because it is a redistribution of wealth to help provide a safety net so that old people and in Medicaid, younger people can get access to care. Free and reduced lunch, school lunches, Head Start programs to help the poor, housing and urban development, low-income housing. The programs go on and on. There is so much. And Johnson called it his Great Society and his war on poverty. And he was so ambitious. He wanted to get all this done, and he started getting things passed and was getting it done. And then Vietnam lands in his lap. It had been struggled over from Truman to Eisenhower to Kennedy. But when he becomes president, you either go all in or you leave. And by that time already, we'd had 5,000 or so Americans killed. And in hindsight, people might be like, yeah, he should have just left and got out. But he would have looked weak on communism. That's the last thing you want to do, is look weak on communism. You'll surely lose an election that way. And then second, if you get out of there, you go tell the parents of the 5,000 young men who were killed and say, well, your son really died for nothing. We just shouldn't have been there to begin with. So then he commits. And then we send 100, 200, 300, 400, 500,000 troops. And we're still not winning. And 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 troops come home dead. And now we're committed. I mean, it's a basic thing of war. I mean, that's why Putin's not going to quit Ukraine anytime soon. They've at least lost 100,000 lives. Twice as many as we've lost in Vietnam. You think Putin's going to go to the Russian people and say, I never should have invaded that in the first place. No. And Johnson can't back out now either, but he's desperately trying to find a way out. While at least maintaining some sort of democracy in Vietnam, South Vietnam, because it's divided and it's complicated. And he is caught in what we call a quagmire, a muddy, boggy situation from which you cannot get out of. And Vietnam's sometimes known as a quagmire. And so he's one of the most successful presidents in history, but Vietnam will bring down his presidency. And ultimately, he won't run for re-election. And then Nixon is handed off to Nixon, and there's protests that the country's being torn apart over it. And it's a very divisive and tumultuous time. But we live in very divisive times now as well, perhaps none, probably as much as the 60s. So that's all I have time to tell you about with regard to that. I tried to give you hints on your answer. So I hope you'll read it closely. It's really interesting. Crash course videos, if you haven't watched those, I haven't put a link to those this year, but those are really good. John Green, crash course videos, watch those. They'll sum that up very, very nice as well. So those are a few things. So best of luck this week, and hope everything's fine. Always email me if you want, if you have any questions. Thanks.